Be advised, we understand some of the content of this presentation may be emotionally triggering in nature. Please listen as you feel comfortable. Hey everybody, we want to welcome you to today's episode, Tusc Against Trafficking's podcast. Today, I'm Jocelyn Hamsher, and today we have two very special guests with us. We're going to talk about trauma, and so these are the ladies that we want to hear from. First, we have Kristina Drummer. Chris is the program manager and counselor at Compass Rape Crisis Center. And then we also have Brandi Ankrom, and Brandi is the director of community and youth services at OhioGuidestone. Many of you may know it was personal family counseling services, so you just changed that name. So thank you so much for being here, ladies. Truly appreciate it. I just want to start off with each of you just sharing a little bit of who you are and what you do and who you serve. So, Chris, do you want to start it?
Sure, thank you. So, like you said, my name is Kristina Drummer, and I am the program manager / counselor at Compass. I have been there around 11 years. And we actually started counseling services at Compass in 2016. So I've been in the role of providing trauma counseling as well since 2016. And we service survivors and co-survivors of sexual violence. And that encompasses, a lot of people think, you'll hear the term, we're the Rape Crisis Center. While we're that, we also, though, work with the spectrum of sexual violence. So today I think we're going to talk a little bit about human trafficking, and that is definitely a scope of what we work with as well.
Awesome. Thank you for what you do. Brandi, go ahead and share.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me.
You bet.
So at OhioGuidestone, we provide a wide range of services serving children from birth up to the age of 18, and then we also continue on with services for adults up through the elderly years, and we have a wide variety of programs, including 2 domestic violence shelters, one in Tusc and one in Carroll County, and we also have drug and alcohol treatments for adults, and a residential program that provides services for those adults.
Fabulous.
And our youth services, we provide home-based counseling, school-based counseling, where we go into the schools and work with our youth in the schools and things. And then we also have a lot of prevention services, taking it to the schools and Help Me Grow, early childhood consultations. So wide range of services.
Wonderful. Much needed. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to get started with our conversation today. And Chris, I want to start with you. In the work that you do, how do you see trauma impact a person?
Well, mostly when we have people walk through our doors, they are at the point where they're ready to start working on their trauma. And so they've had a lot of life experiences where it's manifested as far as like with drugs and alcohol, unhealthy relationships. Sometimes, when we're working with people, I'm coming in right after whether their trafficking situation or a recent rape, or it could be something that happened 30 years ago. So it could be immediate help they're looking for, or again, that complex trauma where there's also decades on it. And so it could be divorces, drugs and alcohol, self-harm behaviors, suicidal attempts. So yeah, it just manifests in a lot of different ways for a lot of different people.
So trauma can stay hidden for a long time and then resurface. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, our brains have an amazing way of trying to protect us. And so when that trauma happens, for whatever reason, the circumstance we're in, if we're not able or ready to handle that trauma and walking through the trauma journey, it definitely can be buried and stay hidden.
Oh, isn't that something? Yeah. Okay. Well, if I am a loved one, if I have someone that is in my family or a friend that has experienced trauma, how will they relate to me, or what could I see as far as maybe from their traumatic experience in some of their reactions to me in doing life together?
Well, when you're specifically talking about sexual violence, the clients I work with, one of the big things across the board that they're dealing with is, how do I deal with intimacy again? And that's intimacy with, friendships, dating relationships, marriages, they're just loved ones in general. And so because of that act of violence that they had, or long stemming violence that they went through, trust is gone. And just trying to form that trust and intimacy back in relationships. So the advice is, you have to take it slow, with the loved one, be there, listen a lot. Trauma looks different on everybody. And so one day the person could be back to their quote unquote normal as they were prior to the event. And then the next day they're completely different. And, that can be hard and confusing for the loved one to kind of keep on that roller coaster. But it's understanding that, that there's going to be highs and lows, and just really being a listener, being able to listen to what the needs are of that person.
Okay.
And that's why we also help co-survivors, because a lot of times the loved ones also need that help. How do I get it where my husband or my wife doesn't flinch when I go to touch them again, or hug my son? And, so the co-survivor piece is just as big as helping the survivors.
That's excellent. Okay, so you talked about mistrust. That's something that you see. And the emotional volatility, would that be a good word? Just up and down and day to day. Is there anything else that comes to mind as I'm doing life with someone who's experienced trauma? Because those are good. So you're saying consistency,
the
listening.
space. I would say space is another one. Space to allow them to, like I said, day to day, it could change what they need. And the good thing, healing can come from trauma. We'll probably talk about that in a little bit. But if you're going to be on that journey with them, you have to be ready to expect it's a journey.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Brandi, you said you work with all age groups, right? From little birth, you said, on up.
Yes.
Okay. So how have you seen, and I'm sure you've worked and your agency's worked with a lot of kids who have experienced trauma. Can you fill us in, how does that look? How do children act or behave when they've experienced trauma? What would I see as a teacher, or as maybe, I have daughters or sons and their friends that I might see, interacting. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. As Chris shared, trauma, it looks different on everyone. So expecting someone who has gone through trauma to look the same as everybody else is somewhat unrealistic. Life experiences shape how we deal with trauma. Our resiliency factors that we have change how we deal with trauma. You could have children who become completely different than what they typically act like. So a child could be acting out in ways of hitting more often, yelling, screaming, night terrors, all of a sudden having issues with the bathroom, having accidents, things like that. Or you could have a child who then is really outgoing and things, and they may become more quiet, more withdrawn, more reserved. Now, children can experience these behaviors and they have not been traumatized. Trauma is somewhat of a tricky word. Individuals who have maybe experienced trauma, as we define it as professionals, may not view what they've went through as trauma or as a traumatic experience. And so being very careful when we use the words trauma or victim, when we're talking with the families and kids, that may not be how they view themselves. And so using the same terminology that they utilize. So however they are referring to what happened to them and things. So.
Gotcha. Okay. So kids could become really angry. Mm-hmm. They could become withdrawn.
Yes.
Okay.
It doesn't hit kids or anyone, all in the same. People react to an experience that happened to them that could be classified as trauma in vastly different ways. We're not all the same, which is great. It would be very dull indeed if we all acted the same, looked the same. How we experience things are different as well, because not only are we experiencing it differently, we're experiencing it based on our own life experiences up to that point of that event.
So here's a question. Is there always some sort of change? Like
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Well, I was going to throw in there that, when we're talking about sexual violence and human trafficking, we know statistically most of the time the perpetrator is someone that person knows, that trusted adult, trusted family member. And so another thing, part of the trauma journey is the mixed feelings. I still love this person, or this person, said they were going to take care of me, and this is how they take care of me. And so it's not always going to be they're going to be presenting this horrible thing that happened to me.
There's a lot of feelings and emotions that come along with that, because it's, as Chris said, it could be someone that they trusted and is in a position to care for them, and this is how they show that, and sometimes kids don't know any different.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Not to mention if there's manipulation on obviously from the trafficker or groomer. Okay. How do, Brandi, this would be for you again. How do children's experiences with trauma impact them throughout their childhood then, and even into adulthood? It's kind of a loaded question.
Okay. The way that trauma could impact a child, it could be socially. They can, again, run that gamut of they're not wanting to leave the home, they're not wanting to go out with anyone, they're wanting to stay close in a safe place that they've identified as safe, to you see no changes in any social behaviors, to they'll go with anybody, or they go out with anybody, or there's no fear, no sense of safety that they keep for themselves. Emotionally, you could again look at a wide gamut of symptoms and how they react from nothing at all to extreme anger, not trusting anyone, as Chris shared, and things. Again, that kind of falls into some of the behavioral, lots of emotions, trigger responses. So they could, as Chris shared, people could look and feel like they're fine and typical, and then a certain smell, a certain touch, a certain something they see, anything that kind of brings in those five senses can trigger a response. And academically, it can impact academics. It's very hard to really focus as a child on what we need to do in school when we're worried about, are we safe, or are we having to leave that situation and we're going back to that traumatic event that might be occurring that nobody knows about, and things. And kids can carry that into adulthood as well. Lots of trust issues, as Chris already mentioned, and other difficulties that they can experience.
Okay. So Brandi, so what can be done to help a child who's experienced trauma?
So to help a child who's disclosed, who's shared that they've experienced something traumatic, whether that be victimization, physical abuse, neglect, whatever the trauma is that they have experienced, being a safe person, being someone that they can talk with, that they can come to you and they don't feel judged. They don't feel that you are going to react and blame them for anything that has occurred. Because for children, they're children, regardless of 4, 16, 17, they are still the child, the victim in this. And so making sure that you are that supportive person, being very careful as they are talking with you to monitor your nonverbals, watching your face to make sure you're not showing, that you're horrified by what they're saying, or you're angry, or things like that. Take your cues from that child. Listen. Don't question. Just listen. Which is, as adults, I find this myself. I struggle just to stay quiet and let them talk and listen, and let them share what they want to share, and don't question or try to get additional information. Be aware as adults of our responses to those kids. Seek out professional help. Definitely. We have a great agency in Compass and OhioGuidestone and various other counseling agencies in the community that can help a parent or caregiver navigate those waters with a child who's experienced something traumatic, and just be there and listen.
Thank you.
And I think
Chris,
one thing, when we're talking about having someone come forward and feel uncomfortable with disclosing, is making sure to remember, whether that's kids or adults, they're the experts of themselves, and so even if it's a 9-year-old, if they are feeling, for whatever reason, not comfortable yet enough to disclose, there's a reason for that, and so going back to, like you said, with the questioning, we might think that we're doing a good service, if we can get this information out of the kid or out of the adult, start that healing process, but that has to be their lane to go in. And we can do more harm trying to push the healing process, like anything. And I have survivors tell me this all the time. As humans, we want things like this, and they want their healing like that. But sometimes it can't happen that way. There might be safety issues. Again, going back to with human trafficking and sexual violence, there's a lot of interwoven financial maybe ties, just a lot of things that the person has to consider before they just start the ball rolling of disclosing what happened.
Okay.
And this is a great opportunity, as Chris was saying, to let them have that. This is their chance to gain some control over a situation they had no control over, whether it's an adult or a child, letting them have the control. It's a great first step in walking that long journey to heal.
And this is when we're talking about sexual violence, it's a hard topic to start conversation and to engage people for conversation. But that's the other part of people feeling comfortable to come forward and share what happened. If they're overhearing conversations that are very victim blaming, very toxic, in support of perpetrator behavior, or just not being an ally. Because, you can not do the rape jokes or the domestic violence jokes, but are you an ally also? Right. Like, what are you doing to help make the community you live in safer for people to come forward and talk about what they've experienced?
Great point. Thank you, ladies. Chris, I want to go back to you. You've been doing this for a while, obviously. There might be some common questions that you've heard over the years from people who've experienced some trauma or violence. Can you, for those listening today that may have had some very traumatic and hurtful experiences, can you speak some words of help, of maybe reassurance, even direction for those individuals? Maybe just thinking about some of the things that you've heard over the years that could be helpful.
One thing that I got early on, and it's something every single client that I work with at some point in our journey together says, and it's, how do I know when I'm healed? Like, how do I know when I'm past this? And I had a teacher once kind of describe trauma as a wound, like a physical wound. So, where you get scratched and you get that first layer of skin off and you have that scab, like that's the wound you see. But then even as it heals, it's still there. Like that place was still wounded. And I think sometimes thinking about healing is, if I'm healed, I'm not going to think about being trafficked. I'm not going to remember the horrible situations I was in. I'm not going to be bothered by. And that's just not the case, because you're talking about traumatic experiences, and those will stay with you. But the part of healing is, how can I work to have those things not hinder my life anymore? Not make me feel like drugs or alcohol are the only thing that is going to quiet my head, or, self-harm. So that is like the biggest question. And when I see my client kind of notice that, that it's not this one-stop shop for healing, that it's a journey, and they've already made a lot of progress just by coming through the door, awesome. Wanting counseling, that I can see some of that heaviness, come off of them as far as, oh, I am doing what I need to be doing.
That's awesome.
And just the realization that, again, we're talking about sexual violence and human trafficking, and those experiences do leave their mark, but with resiliency and good support and good, understanding and people around you, that mark won't hurt as much, is the hope.
That's awesome. There's, a lot of hope. So this is a long process. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, some of the stuff in counseling, you can get, some of the coping skills and stuff like that you can learn and really implement right away. But when you're talking about, rebuilding that trust, feeling in control of things again, feeling like you have control of your own body, those things are going to take time.
And that I love that you mentioned that, because that is a question that I hear. How am I going to trust again? And what does healthy relationship look like for me? Will I get to that? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. So at Compass, we also, do a curriculum with healthy relationships, and you can't have one without the other. So if we're going to talk about sexual violence and what that looks like, we also have to show them and teach them what healthy looks like. And a lot of it first comes down to our language, what kind of language we're using when we try and explain stuff. Human trafficking and sexual violence, that's not sex. That's not healthy relationships. That's power and control and humiliation. But sometimes we use words to explain the same, and that can be confusing. And so knowing, trust is one of those words that, like, how do you describe trust? It's like describing love. And I think that's what's hard for people too. They know that they don't have it. How do I get it back?
It's truly a feeling. When you trust someone, and you kind of have that innate feeling of, I know when I don't trust someone. And so that feeling just is, as you don't trust more and more people, it becomes more prevalent and things. And I like we do need to teach the healthy relationships and the unhealthy relationships, because children who have been traumatized and victimized and with child abuse can grow up to, or as they're growing up, experience additional abuse through human trafficking, because they don't know what that healthy relationship looks like. So someone who comes in to a child who has been neglected, not a lot of care and support in the family, through whatever happens with that. There's a wide range of things that why that occurs. So you have a child who is starved for affection and wants to just have someone who loves them for them. And you have a perpetrator come along and can easily start that grooming process. And to that child or adult, it doesn't look like trafficking. They're doing this because I love them. I'm doing this because I love them. They're doing this for me because they love me.
So we talk a lot about, again, trying to trust your gut. When you hear that voice, a lot of times we silence that voice because we're taught to be nice to others, and it's rude or inconsiderate if I don't hug you or if I say no. Setting boundaries is difficult, and then we also make it more difficult when we add that, well, don't be rude. That's being mean. And so I think, trust is, listening to your gut, and then also time.
I was going to say. Yeah.
So, if we're talking about relationships, whether it's friendship, romantic, whatever, time tells all. Qualities come out of a person over time. Again, as humans, we're quick to want quick results and quick, so we want to move fast in relationships, but yeah, definitely taking time. And if your trust is broken, it's not your fault. So if you do give the time and you do, your gut doesn't go off, it doesn't give you any kind of warning, and you've known this person a long period of time and they break that trust, again, that's their fault. It's not something you did wrong.
Right.
It does take time. And to go along with Chris, we're taught to be nice from a young age, to say thank you, gives hugs and kisses and things. And if you think about it, when we're dealing with, especially with our kids, we teach them, good and bad. If you do this, you're good. If you do this, you're bad. Well, then when we're starting to talk about touches, good touches, bad touches, not the best phrasing to use, because now that child has had a bad touch. So they're going to oftentimes think, well, I'm the bad one. They touched me. I'm bad now. So using safe versus unsafe. These are safe touches. Who's allowed to give you safe touches? These are unsafe touches, or these are unsafe places to touch. Just your terminology with kids. Because, if you think about a lot of the kids we deal with are our own kids or grandkids, they want to please us, and
And I really like when you brought up the healthy relationships, because if you know what healthy relationships look like, obviously that trust can go eventually. If you're with someone that's not healthy, you're going to say, okay, they're violating my boundaries. They're not respecting me. They're not valuing me. They're not respecting my no. And so I think when we know what that healthy looks like, then we have a better gauge of, okay, can I trust? Can I not trust? So, yeah. Absolutely. Excellent. Okay. So I think we're almost finished here, but is there anything that you want to share just as a takeaway, or one thing that you would want listeners to know or take with them today, just about what we've talked about?
Oh, there's so many. No. I think I would, again, this is a topic we wish we didn't have to talk about. I would love to be out of a job someday. Well, out of this job, if we did away with sexual violence and human trafficking. But we have to be okay to talk about it. We have to do better as a community to talk about it, have these conversations at home, have conversations with, like you said, kids, grandkids. It's not a taboo subject. We make people stay in that silence longer when we don't want to talk about it and are not willing to hear what they have to say. And so figuring out how you can be an ally, get in touch with any of the organizations in the community, see how you can help, call out behavior when you see it, not appropriate behavior, or if that's not what you're comfortable with, again, call any of the agencies, reach out to a friend, just get involved somehow.
Great. Thank you. And Chris, real quick, you mentioned your agency reaching out to services or for services. Can you tell people, if anyone's experienced sexual violence or would need some of your services, how could they get a hold of your agency or a hold of you?
So we actually have a 24-hour crisis line, and so they can call that. We have a crisis line for Tuscarawas and Carroll County. That number is 330-339-1427. And then a separate line for Stark County, and that's 330-452-1111. Awesome. But if you're in Stark County and call it doesn't matter. Either one of those hotlines,
right.
Yeah, you can get through.
Good.
Important thing to take away from that is to call.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. And Brandi, anything you'd want to leave listeners today?
I would just like to leave listeners with things happen. Trauma happens. It doesn't, though, need to define who you are throughout childhood, throughout adulthood. And that taking that journey, it's a difficult one. And there's lots of ups and downs and valleys and dips and turns and any other geographical item you can list. But it It is worth it. And reaching out, like Chris said, for services and things. And again, just that talking about it. Talking about it doesn't mean it's going to make it happen. Human trafficking is happening. It is happening in little rural Tuscarawas County. And like Chris was sharing, if you see something just seems off, trust your gut and call authorities, whatever you need to do with regards to that, while keeping yourself safe. And again, reaching out for those services.
Awesome. And Brandi, tell us, if someone would need counseling or for drug and alcohol abuse or anything, or even shelter, how would they get a hold of your agency?
So Jocelyn, for someone to reach Ohio Guidestone for services here locally, our office number is 330-343-8171. If you are experiencing domestic violence, we also have a domestic violence hotline, and that number is 330-364-1374.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandi. Thank you, ladies, for everything you do for our community and the way that you help people, walk alongside people, bring healing and hope. Truly appreciate you. Yes. Thank you for your time and your
all your hard work.
Oh, hey. It's team, isn't it?
Yes.
We work together. That's right. So thanks again for being here, for your expertise, and we'll see you guys next time.
So that was a great conversation, Jocelyn, that you had with Chris and Brandi over trauma. I hope for our listeners and the people watching that they were able to take away some key points from dealing with trauma and how it affects the person as a whole.
And our agencies in this county also have some very good skills with dealing with trauma. So I would encourage people to reach out if they've experienced trauma at any point in time, whether it be 30 years ago, as Chris was talking about, or just yesterday.
Yeah. And once again, guys, if you have any questions from the trauma episode, please submit those on our website, tuscagainsttrafficking.org, or through our email, info@tuscagainsttrafficking.org, or on our Facebook page. So we'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much. If you would like to contribute to anti-trafficking efforts in Tuscarawas County, you can send your donations to Compass at P.O. Box 481, New Philadelphia, Ohio 44663. Please be sure to indicate human trafficking in the memo line. We appreciate your partnership in this work. Together, we can make a difference.